Years of super easy monetary policy usually moves in the other direction. And the more exaggerated it is on the way down, the more exaggerated it'll be on the way up. That's what we're seeing today. And of course, it affects everything: stocks and bonds and real estate. And just about every asset class is going to feel the effects of this. And I don't think people realize what we are dealing with today is so extreme historically that most people, most analysts, most historians are simply flabbergasted by it all. Let me show you what's happening here. If you stay to the end, I've got some pointers that I want to let you know about, to take action, and so on. Here we go. Russia has scrapped a Saturday deadline to resume flows via a major gas supply route to Germany. You remember Nord Stream 2 was going to come online and suddenly it was shut off. They said, we're not going to approve that. Germany was saying, we don't want to approve it. This happened 2 weeks later. The whole Ukraine thing occurred. Okay. Now we got Nord Stream 1. They said it would be a few days. Routine maintenance, we need to fix this and that, and now they're saying we can't bring it back online. Are they trying to squeeze them? Perhaps. I don't think they're necessarily going to turn the taps off completely because Russia likes this relationship and both sides could have benefited from this, but of course, this is what happens. Anyway, here you have it. You're just seeing that this is deepening Europe's difficulties in securing winter fuel after saying it had found faults in the Nord Stream 1 pipeline during maintenance. Here you have it, looking at all of this during the time in which they're already suffering very high prices, and now you've got the major pipeline shut down. Even if it's for a few days, this will have a dramatic effect. Then you have this. Why shouldn't it be as bad as it was in the 1970s? Historian Neil Ferguson warns that the world is sleepwalking into an era of political and economic upheaval akin to the 1970s, only worse. So I can't remember which book I read of him. I remember quoting him in my first book, had a lot of good things to say. And I just found it interesting and a couple quotes that he had here. And by the way, whenever I quote somebody, it doesn't really matter who it is or anything. I just like the quote itself. I try not to think about it, any deeper than that. I'm going to go out on a limb. Let's consider the possibility that the 2020s could actually be worse than the 1970s. That was one of the many quotes in here. I believe that's further down in the article. But he makes a few points. The ingredients of the 1970s are already in place. The monetary and fiscal policy, by the way, I love this, mistakes of last year, which set this inflation off, are very likely, very alike to the 60s. This is important because when you see the comparison in between what had happened in the 1970s, a lot of those things are occurring today. Now, does that mean the exact same situation? No, absolutely not. But that's what we are seeing right now. So I just wanted to point that out. Let me take a look further at this and you'll see it here. And in the 1973, you get a war. And what happened there? This war is lasted much longer than the 1973 war. So the energy shock it is causing is actually going to be more sustained. And that's what people are not prepared for. They're saying, yeah, it's going to be taken care of. Don't worry. Look at 2020, how fast that was all done and over with. The stock market went down for, 3 weeks? And suddenly it turned around. This is a very different scenario, of course. Okay, why shouldn't it be as bad as the 70s? Could actually be worse than the 1970s. At least in the 1970s, you had the tent. I mispronounced it. Between superpowers, I don't see much tent between Washington and Beijing right now. In fact, I see the opposite. You see what's happening with Taiwan. You look at China, and of course, that is a concern. The distributions in history really aren't normal, particularly when it comes to things like wars, financial crisis, or for that matter, what happened during 2020. Okay. And he just basically goes on. Okay. I don't want to beat a dead horse with this article, but you could see that this is going on today. What we have, there are many similarities, but the important point here is that it's affecting real people. Real people are getting hurt by all this. This is just one example here. Testing times. 1,200-year-old pub is fighting for survival amid cost of living crisis. Now think to yourself for a second here. Imagine what has happened over the last 1,200 years. This pub has survived everything, but now it can't survive what's occurring in a time in which there's been so many things. Just 2020. Look at all these activities over the years. Financial crisis, depression. My goodness. And now this could push it over the edge. Something so simple. This is why I tell people all the time, you are not going to get the basic information that you need to survive. And that's why we must do our own digging, please. Okay, look, metal plants feeding Europe's factories face an existential crisis. Power intensive aluminum smelters say that they need government support to survive. And this will likely happen. You're going to see this more and more bailouts occur. And I believe I brought up one in yesterday's video or the day before where this is going to occur. But of course, as I have said, a bailout does not resolve a crisis. A bailout takes it from private hands into the public. So that means you as a taxpayer are actually doing this. So you are paying a higher price. You might pay a higher price directly, or you might pay it indirectly through taxation. And they're basically just talking about what happens with aluminum. Aluminum uses a lot more electricity than other metals. In comparison, they show copper here. But you have an issue when you start to shut down production as a result. This is just showing us the comparison. Power hungry, aluminum requires about 40 times more energy to make than copper. And you see the comparison there. Copper, steel, zinc, and aluminum. So this is just something I wanted to show you. And, if you don't have aluminum, if you're not producing it, if the plants are shutting down, if you have these type of concerns, well, then I think it's going to be a big factor for a lot of businesses. The input costs are going up dramatically. Suddenly, people are going to say, you know what, maybe I don't need that anymore. Maybe I don't need this anymore. And it's going to affect a lot of jobs, and the economy takes a hit as a result. Okay, look at this here. I show you that Europe is fighting to stave off an energy catastrophe that's threatening to become an economic, social, and even financial crisis. Look, Nordic authorities moved this weekend to bolster the liquidity of utilities struggling with collateral requirements, saying that there was a risk of a, look at this, Lehman moment. So this is something that people should be thinking about. They should be analyzing on their own, because you're not going to hear about a lot of this in the mainstream media. They might bring it up. Yeah, power prices are going up. But when we hear things like a Lehman moment, like a black swan event, these terms have been abused and overused, certainly. But there's something happening today when you've got just that one anecdotal example of a 1,200-year-old pub probably going to be shutting down. I mean, maybe they can crowdsource and crowdfund, but that shouldn't need to happen. What we are looking at right now is a catastrophe, to say the least. So there are things that you can do. Stick with me, okay? Because I'll bring that up in this video here today. All throughout this time, like I said, you've got a crisis that affects people in different ways, businesses in different ways. And there's also going to be an impact, not just on the assets, but also the currencies. You see, British pound sinks to the lowest level against the dollar since 1985. Look at the euro. Okay, I haven't checked it, this week here, but it is at parity approximately. Parity. Okay, we are looking at a very strong US dollar. And in comparison, we are looking at other currencies, British pound and the euro and others, weakening dramatically. And this has an impact because if you're pricing everything in US dollars, reserve currency, what do you think that does to all of the other people around the world that have to buy things either directly or indirectly? It's going to make things more expensive, more and more expensive. Okay, it's just going to keep going. This is just something I wanted to show you just really quickly. Consumers feel worse than they did during the lockdowns. So imagine during 2020, everybody's locked in their homes. Nobody knows what's going on. They're hearing all this stuff in the news, crazy times, all of this. And now consumers feel worse about the situation. There's just a chart over there, and there's following one in the article. But this is just a Wall Street Journal article, and I'm just pointing this out to show you how intense things are. Because when you're living in it, it might be hard to see. You might not really get the whole message, but understand that this is happening right now before our very eyes, and it is quite extreme, to say the least. And I wonder how many people are really taking action today to try to mitigate some of the damages, because everybody can do something. Right? Maybe some people have really big leaps, others have baby steps. But as long as you are working towards that, I think you're in a better position. That's just the way I see it. Okay, here we have, look at it. Housing Affordability Index. There's that time frame around 2006 where it really dips low. It's basically at that low. So this is like the least affordable homes have ever been. You look at the Home Purchase Sentiment Index. Going back, this goes back all the way to 2011, and we're almost heading there. It's just showing us how extreme it is. How extreme. I mean, we've only had a few examples like this. Then we have this. The comparison, I've showed you this before, and now I actually have this for you in a chart form with updated data. Comparing, essentially what you're comparing here is the ratio in between the energy versus the market itself, stock market itself. Right now, it's insane, but in this one way to measure it, you look at the price of energy is extremely cheap in comparison to the broad market. Now that to me is so unusual because the prices, think about where oil and all these other commodities, they might be, excuse me, they might be way off their highs, but it is still unquestionably higher than where it was previously. And yet the stock market looks expensive in comparison. So what does that tell you about the nature of the current situation? Does that mean that stock prices have to go down dramatically, or that commodity prices have to go up significantly, or a bit of both? And that just gives us a little bit of, something to think about, some homework for us all. Okay. Now look at what we have here. US stock funds are down 17.3% so far in 2022. And essentially what they say here in the subtitle, but also in the article, is that you will be unlikely to see positive returns for the stock market this year on a historic basis. So, that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how significant the drop has been so far and the prospects for the remainder of the year, but we'll see what happens. You stayed until this part of the video. I want to thank you for that. It's important to take action. Only pay attention. This is everything, your daily life. Only pay attention to that which brings you closer to your goals, whether that's financial, relationship, or preparedness. A lot of people, they are just completely, I don't know where their mentality is. I mean, there's such important things, and they focus on the little nonsense details. Stop overlooking the big picture, and stop overlooking the big picture by focusing on the fine details. You're, as I said, if you're looking at all these little nonsense details, you're not going to really see what's happening. You have to zoom out and understand what's important to you, what's important to your family, to everything that you're doing as an individual, and then think, do I really need to be focused on that? Do I really need to be thinking about that? Maybe the answer is no. Always have something that anchors you in your life. That might be, your relationship with your family. That might be a spiritual thing. It might be financial. Whatever it is, find that anchor and make sure that you stick with that, okay? Take action every day towards what you desire. Don't be held back by procrastination. I see a lot of people that are procrastinators, and I wish this wasn't the case, but unfortunately it is. A lot of individuals, they just get themselves, and they don't think they're procrastinating. They think it's productive. I'm doing something productive, but a lot of times it really isn't, okay? If there's not a measurable and defined goal on this, chances are you probably shouldn't be doing that if it's something that you're working towards, okay? So that's just the way it works. I hope this was valid and informative to you. If you did find it informative, you've got to subscribe to the channel, okay? I do appreciate that very much. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.